Hey, come on in. I'm Slushy and I've been developing games for over 10 years. I don't know about you, but I've played way too many games with bad level design, and made a few myself. If you've had to endure low quality level design because you wanted to finish the story, or because you just hoped the level design would improve as you got further into the game, or just because you didn't want to feel like you wasted $60, then please like this video and hit the subscribe button, and let's see if we can do something about it. Alright, let's talk level design. There's good level design, the kind that amazes you with its creativity, or the kind that's incredibly well balanced and thought through, almost as if the players created the level. And there's the kind of level design that's so good, you don't even notice it. It's so good that you're able to just remain focused on the experience of playing the game, experiencing what the game designer wanted you to, instead of looking around and making comments about the experience itself. Then there's bad level design. More often than not, bad level design is easy to spot. But sometimes the overall game experience can be of a certain quality that it's not immediately apparent that the level design is even a problem. It's possible the level design is really the least of this game's worries. If you're dealing with sluggish controls, confusing interfaces, or even just suffering through some bad voice acting, that may be enough to keep you from realizing that in addition to those things, you're also suffering from bad level design. Video games are subjective. Something you like may not be something I like, but video game players, old and new, over the last 60 years of video games' existence, have all gotten together and decided what makes a good game experience, usually, and what makes pretty good level design, usually. I say usually because there's really no hard or fast rule to determine if a game has good level design, or if a game is even good at all. The closest thing we have to a scientific metric is looking at how many copies a game sells, or how many downloads a game gets. But those don't actually measure the quality of a game. Those numbers only tell you how many people bought that game or downloaded that game. That game could have terrible level design, or just be a terrible game overall. But usually they're not. So that brings me to the first tip. Keep the player in mind. It's easy to get into designing your levels and spending hours and hours completely immersed in your level. These levels are like a world to you. They're your world. You're designing them, creating them, and bringing them to life because you want players to experience them. You want to make something challenging, or something cool and exciting. But unless the game you're working on is just a hobby project for yourself, or you're just super new to making games, and you're trying to get the hang of things overall, these levels you're designing are meant to be experienced by other players. Bad level design is similar to spending the whole day cleaning up your house so you can invite people over, but instead of your clean house having a front door, it's just a wall and your friends have to climb up on the roof and enter your house through the chimney. So when designing your levels, you really need to think about things from the player's perspective, which can be incredibly hard because you're down in the weeds focused on the mechanical aspects of actually building this level and the creativity that is required to do so. But the player isn't going to experience any of that. They're just going to experience the thing you get done building. So you have to build your level with intent. You need to make it a priority to try and put yourself in the player's shoes throughout the entirety of the level design. It takes effort, and it's not something that tends to occur naturally in game developers, but it's definitely something that can be improved with practice. Part of practicing keeping the player in mind actually involves showing the game you're making to the player, and so that brings us to my next tip. Tip number 2, show your game early and often. If you want to design with the player in mind, you have to get at least an understanding of the mind of the player. You want to get as much meaningful feedback as possible as early in the development life cycle of the game as you can, because if you're headed down the wrong level design path, you want to know as soon as possible. Spending dozens of hours crafting your level and then releasing it, only to discover that players are getting stuck at the very beginning of the level, is the worst. You wouldn't have wasted so much time if you'd shown that level entrance to someone early on. Then they could have told you it had issues, and you could redesign it before basing the rest of the level on this bad design. Show it to players early and often. Watch them play. If you're in person, watch over their shoulder and see how they play it. Where do they get stuck? Was it too easy? Take plenty of notes, but make sure you don't say anything. Anything you say to the person playing your level may inadvertently influence their experience, and you may not get an accurate result. Now, showing your game to people online and getting useful feedback is a bit trickier than doing it in person, but given our circumstances, this is likely going to be the most common way you're going to get feedback on your level design. For these situations, you can implement analytics into your level and track important events. track progress in the level, and track other things like time spent in level. Or if you want to get clever, you can actually track the movement of the player through the level and see what areas they're spending the most time in, possibly indicating a design issue in those areas. In fact, this is a lot of what commercial game studios are already doing, and they're doing it after the game's been released. Mobile game companies use live players as their testing grounds and use analytics to track what players are doing, where they get stuck, where they stop playing, and so on. It's also probably not a bad idea to add these kinds of analytics to your desktop Steam game if you're making one. No, you won't necessarily want to track the players after your game launches. They bought the game, they own it, they probably don't want you tracking their activity. But before you launch the game, anything goes, and it's one of the few ways you'll be able to get a large amount of level design testing done before you release it to the masses. It's either add analytics to your game or mail all of your playtesters a camera and record them playing your game. This brings me to the last tip. Build with intent. Understand what it is that you're trying to do with this level. What is your intent on building this level? Are you trying to make the player feel a certain way? Or are you trying to give the player a big area to explore without much challenge? Give yourself some time and just really think about why you're building this level. If you just jump in and start designing your level without truly understanding why you're doing this to the player, then chances are high that your level design is going to feel uninspired or generic, or difficult to navigate because you're used to it, but players have never seen it, or just plain not fun to play. Instead, pick a reason to build this level for the player. Want them to feel scared? Great, that's going to guide the rest of your design, and you'll build aspects into your level that echo that feeling. The more specific of a reason you can come up with for building the level for this player, the more focused your level will be on achieving that goal. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you found these tips useful, or if you have your own level design tips you'd like to share, please leave a comment down below. I think the 3 tips I listed, keep the player in mind, show your game early and often, and build with intent, are great tips because they all fit together and build off of each other, and ultimately make your level design more pleasing and intuitive. One of the main takeaways here is that the levels you design are really levels for the player, not just you. Don't forget that, and happy designing, everybody. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.